Bienvenidos, bienvenidas. Estamos con Jackie Stavros en la serie de webinars que estamos creando y impulsando desde el Instituto IDEA. Jackie Stavros es una de las impulsoras de la indagación apreciativa a nivel internacional. Ella creó un modelo de diagnóstico organizacional titulado el SOAR. SOAR en inglés es remontarse, elevarse, y es un modelo que no es que sustituya, pero que complementa al DAFO, al SWOT en inglés. Ella ha publicado varios libros, es una de las docentes estrella del Instituto IDEA. Con ella vamos a impulsar un nuevo curso que iniciará, ahora no me acuerdo si en enero o en febrero, y lo veréis en nuestra página del Instituto IDEA Academy. Y además ella pues es una de las creadoras del curso que tenemos de feedback apreciativo y feed forward, también que lo ofrecemos desde el Instituto IDEA. Ella nos va a hablar en inglés y yo ahora voy a abrir la cabina de traducción. I am very soon going to the translation and then you can start. Vale.
Okay. And then I can pull up my slide deck, right?
Yeah.
And around slide 15, I'll drop it so you can show the video.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, great.
Vale, pues entonces yo ahora pongo que voy a traducir de inglés a español. Y, okay, yeah, I'm going. Then you don't listen to me. Okay, vale.
Can everybody, Claudia, can you give me a thumbs up? Can you see my slides? Perfect. All right. Thank you so much. So I'm Jackie Stavros, as Miriam introduced me, and people call me sometimes a behavioral and a communication specialist who coaches in the power of both listening as well as asking right questions. And the way you ask questions as a coach can positively impact another person's behavior. So I believe you get further in life by asking questions than telling people what to do. And if you think about it as a coach, coaching to SOAR, questions are the key to getting information. Questions will help you connect with people, strengthen relationships, helps people move from being stuck to unstuck. So if you have a pen, I want you to think about this. I'm going to ask you a question and I want you to write down an answer. Think about how many questions did you ask yourself into yourself or others verbally, maybe in an email, a text, before joining our session today. Think about that. How many questions did you ask? So just, that's just for you to realize how many questions we ask. And the second thing here is communication is the key. The way you communicate either connects you or it disconnects you from people. And so we need skill sets that require us to communicate and coach others in the most effective way possible. And I did some research on Indeed.com, Career Builders, LinkedIn, Monster.com, and they said the most in-demand skill set is we need leaders who know how to ask good questions. So think about the power of inquiry, the power of questioning, and think about that I can ask you a question that puts you in a protect mode, or I can ask you a question that connects you to me. So David Cooperrider, who's one of the co-creators of Appreciative Inquiries, would say, and this is a social construction principle, is that we live in the world our questions create. Think about that. If things are going bad, think about the way your questions are, or things are going good to great. Think about asking what I like to call asking the right questions. Here's the outcomes. If you learn how to ask good questions, you can make the invisible visible, which surface assumptions. You ask good questions, you can create a shared understanding with your employees. You ask really good questions, you can generate new knowledge, new innovations. And if you ask great questions, you can inspire innovation. And I've been studying this for at least 25 years, and there's a little bit of science behind this that I think there's a lot of science behind this, okay? So this next slide is probably one of the favorite of my sciences, which is appreciative inquiry. And appreciative inquiry, hopefully most of you here know what that is. It's one of the most effective and widely used approaches to improve the outcome of any situation by the types of questions you ask. Generative questions, life-giving questions. Now, in this presentation today, I'm going to share with you 4 questions. I mean, this is all about the power of our questions. I did some research on, is there such a thing as asking a right question? What is humanistic AI? What is the power of generativity in your questions? And how can your questions help you and others to soar? So these are the 4 questions we're going to answer in the next 30 minutes. And as I'm going through this, feel free to jot down a note and say, you know, on slide 9, you said this, and then we'll go back to any questions that you have. Or I just might spark a question that you can ask at the end. And I would also encourage you to write down some observations that you have or things that you are most curious about. Because what I can tell you is asking the right questions puts others in the growth mindset. You have one mind and you have 2 settings. You have a very fixed mindset that operates from the back of the brain, and you have a growth mindset that is very expansive, divergent, and operates from the front of the brain that we call the executive function of the brain that allows for critical thinking, creative thinking. And I'm going to share with you how to ask right questions that access that part of the brain of people. So when I started my research, I went to a dictionary. Some dictionaries are electronic, but I went to a dictionary and I just said, what does the word question mean? And the dictionary came back and said that question is the act or instant of asking or inquiring about someone, something, or someplace. I'm like, okay, I like the dictionary definition. So then I looked up the word right, R-I-G-H-T. And the dictionary said, I read, that the word right is looking at what is just, what is good, what is valued, what is genuine, favorable, and desirable. So if you put the 2 terms together, a right question is an inquiry that focuses on what is good, what is favorable, what is desirable, what is a value. And that's what appreciative inquiry is all about. So I came to the conclusion that, yeah, there is a right way to ask questions, and to ask right questions that value people, value the situation, and can change the situation for the better. In a few minutes, we're going to watch a video clip called Above the Line and Below the Line. It's from the Conscious Leadership Group, and I encourage you to watch this video and share it with others beyond this workshop here. But when you're working from above the line, you're more positive with people, you respect people, you're more open-minded, there's gratitude, it's appreciation. When we're going below the line, it's critical, toxic, closed-minded, judgment, and you see blame and shame. Now, we're going to do an experiment together right now so you can get a little bit about how this feels. What I want you to do is I want you to recall a conversation that you were in, or you may have observed, that was critical, that it was depreciative. And I want you to think about how this feels in your mind and in your body. Just think about how a destructive, critical conversation feels. Now, I know I have my slide deck up, but I'd like you to write in the chat. I don't know if you can write in English. I'm not very good at reading Spanish, but think about when you've been in a destructive, critical, negative conversation. How does that feel? How does that feel in your body? And Claudia, maybe if you can see the chat and speak in English to me, you can tell me what they're typing. It feels uncomfortable. Thank you. Aggressive.
Heavy.
Heavy.
Uncomfortable.
Rigid. Tense, right?
Tense, yes. Uncomfortable, tense. I want to go out.
Yeah, you want to blow up. That's really bad for your heart and your mind.
Suffocating, frustrating. I feel anguish.
Okay, we don't want to read anymore. Okay, they're bad. So what I want you to think about is when I ask you about those negative below the line, I want you to put your hands up. Everybody can see. Claudia, put your hands up. I can see you. Seriously, I want you to put your hands behind your back. Everybody put both hands behind their back. And I want you to look at where your thumbs are pointed. They are pointed down. If you put your hands behind your back or behind your head, your thumbs are pointed down and you're in a protect mode, and all the blood flow is going to the back of your base of your brain, and you're not getting enough oxygen to the top of your brain and other places. And that's why when you're in a destructive conversation, you feel the tension up here, you feel the tension in your neck. If you have your smartwatch on, your heart rate is going up. This is bad for you. So what I'd like you to do is just close your eyes for a moment. Everybody close your eyes and take a couple of deep breaths. And I want you to recall a great conversation, a conversation that you may have had with somebody or overheard when you were above the line and things were great and appreciative and life-giving. I want you to find that conversation and recall it. And this time, you're all smiling that I can see your faces. I want you to type in the chat, how does a great conversation feel in your head or in your heart or in your body? How does a great conversation feel? And Claudia, if you can help me read the chat if it's not in English, but just type in the chat, how does a great conversation make you feel?
Accepted, expansive, free, happy, appreciated, full of energy. I flow. Thrill.
Yes. Flow. Yes.
Brilliant. Lowering. Grateful. Happy. Light.
Yeah. These are all good, they're all good feelings. These are good emotions. And what's beginning to happen because we're having great conversations? Put your hands up again, everybody. I want you to put your hands on the front of the executive function of your brain. All right, where are your thumbs pointed? Thumbs are pointed up. That's what happens when you ask right questions, is you're putting people into connect mode. Oxygen and blood is going to all the proper places of your body. And if you're looking at your smartwatch, your heart rate is back where it should be, in a good place, in a good, healthy place. So words are very powerful. Words and even thoughts and conversations impact our health. The other thing that impacts your health, which I may not know, is did you drink enough water today? Did you get enough sleep at night? Did you have enough to eat? Even there's a lot that takes us below the line, but our words do that above and below. So that's how important this is. And in the neuroscience, we know that there's this thing called the amygdala hijack. And you have about 1/4 of a second, and then you react. And so there's all kind of background stuff, but there's about 1/4 of a second. And what we want to do is, if you understand this practice of tuning in, once you first hear those words, if you just pause, take a deep breath, and get curious, pausing and breathing begins to reset your system in your brain so that you can feel above the line and you can handle what is triggering you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the slide deck down for a minute, because Miriam's going to show you a video clip that has translation in Spanish and how important it is to be above the line in our conversations and what happens when we take ourselves or others below the line. So Miriam, I'm going to put the slide deck down and make sure your sound's on, but you're going to show the video clip. I don't think there's any sound, Miriam.
Estaba con el sonido.
For us in English, we weren't listening the sound.
Did you hear the video or no?
No, I guess it's in the Spanish channel of
Okay.
translating.
I can pull it up, but my version's in English.
Okay,
Can
No,
everybody?
I don't know.
He sacado la interpretación. Now everyone listens. And we are going to share the video.
Okay, she's going to share it now. Okay.
And location, brought to you by the Conscious Leadership Group. Find them on the web at www.conscious.is. Animation by Graham Franks, www.grahamfranks.com. One question that conscious leaders ask themselves over and over is, where am I? To support leaders in locating themselves as they ask the question, where am I? We offer this tool, a line, a simple black line. At any moment, all leaders and all people are either above the line or below the line. Our location describes how we're being with what is occurring in our life right now. If we're above the line, we are open, curious, and committed to learning. If we are below the line, we are closed, defensive, and committed to being right. Stop right now and simply ask yourself, where am I? In this now moment, am I above the line or below the line? Typically, when people are below the line, they believe certain things about the world. For example, they believe there is not enough. It could be that there's not enough money, or time, or space, or energy, or love. People below the line also believe that their story about the situation is right. People below the line also believe that there is a threat out there. Something or someone is threatening their desire for approval, control, or security. And people below the line see the situation as serious. The deeper below the line they are, the more serious things look. People below the line tend to behave certain ways as well. They tend to cling to an opinion, find fault and blame, gossip, explain, rationalize and justify, get overwhelmed, and avoid conflict or pursue conflict for the sake of winning. When people are above the line, they believe that learning and growing are more important than being right. They believe that all people and circumstances are their allies, here for their growth. They believe that from a distance, almost everything is funny. People above the line live in curiosity, listen deeply, speak unarguably, question all their beliefs, and live a life of play. Now, knowing what you know about being above or below the line, where are you? One thing to know as you consider this question: we're hardwired to go below the line. Literally, our brain is programmed to perceive threat, and when it does, a chemical cocktail courses through our veins, and we go below the line. This reaction was designed to help us survive in the presence of a real threat to our physical survival. An issue for modern-day leaders is that often our brains can't tell the difference between a threat to our physical survival and a threat to our ego or identity. We react and get defensive when we experience a threat to our ego. So in many ways, being below the line is natural and normal. But when we are below the line, we're not in a state, literally brain state, of high creativity, collaboration, innovation, and relational connection. We're simply trying to survive. Leaders today can't thrive if they're in survival mode. So the first activity of conscious leadership is location, location, location. In this now moment, where am I? Telling ourselves and others the truth about our current location begins the great conversation.
Thank you, Miriam.
Good.
All right.
Oh,
So,
the first day that we signed up.
wait, let me connect again the translation, okay?
Okay, you're going back into the translation room, right?
Yeah, and then Claudia and Patricia, I think also they can help you. A ver,
Okay.
voy a volver a poner la cabina de traducción.
Claudia, can you see my slides? Okay, great. And so we're coming to the end of the first question that I wanted to give you the answer to. There is such a thing as a right question. And when you come from above the line and you ask questions from above the line, your employees, your people, your friends, they're more creative, they're expansive, they're in a really good place. In this little technique called tuning in tells us when you feel a headache or if you're tired or words, remember to just pause. If you just pause, it begins to reset your heartbeat. And then when you breathe, it begins to reset your whole body mindset to get at or above the line. And then you kind of become curious and you're like, why am I below the line? Sometimes you need to take a sip of water or go for a walk or think about what triggered you and get really, really curious. So now we get to my second question. What is humanistic AI? And a humanistic AI is appreciative inquiry. And what I'd like to share with you is I first learned about appreciative inquiry in 1995. I was at Case Western Reserve and I had a qualitative research class with David Cooperwriter. And the class was called Qualitative Research, Appreciative Ways of Knowing. And when David taught that class to me as a qualitative research class, he taught me grounded theory, thematic analysis, but more importantly, he said, there's a way to ask non-neutral questions. And back then, he called it the unconditional positive question, which was appreciative inquiry. Today, a lot of us call it a generative question, and you'll see why in a few minutes. But appreciative inquiry, when it first came out, was simply a way to do research and ask non-neutral questions. And then came the 5 AI principles, and then people were familiar with the 5D cycle of first it was called discovery, dream, design, and deliver. And then there was the define D that was added many, many, many years later to talk about, what do I really want to talk to you about? If I was to ask you a question, tell me how communication is. I don't know if you're going to go positive. I don't know if you're going to go negative and complain about communication, or kind of just be apathetic and not really care about communication. But normally, if I want to ask you a question about how is communication, I probably know what the problems are. So I'm intentionally going to ask you about what are the ways that we best communicate as a team? How do we communicate better? Because I want to move us in a direction of having great communications. So, you know, appreciative inquiry has been my operating system since 1995 when I first met David Cooperrider and Ron Fry. And this is a quote by David. And I want to read to you the middle of the quote says, our organizational lives, those of us are in organizations, for-profit, nonprofit, government, wherever we are, the lives of others flourish or flounder one conversation at a time. And the questions that we ask in our conversations influence relationships in teams, organizations, and communities. So it's important to understand before the appreciative inquiry 5D cycle of discover, define, discover, dream, design, and destiny, there were these 5 principles. And these 5 principles are always at work. Our words create our world. So if our words are negative, our world's kind of gloomy and negative. And if our words are positive and uplifting, our world is uplifting and positive. And that's the constructionist principle. The simultaneity principle is that the minute I ask you a question, I can push you down or I can bring you up. My tone and direction is really important, how I ask you questions. The poetic principle tells me that you have a choice in how you ask a question. And also, people can have multiple interpretations of a word. And anticipatory principle is what we see, we expect to get. So if we think we're part of a really bad team that's doing horrible and our performance is horrible, we're moving in that direction because we just anticipate it and we're thinking the worst of ourselves and everybody. And when we begin to think, we've got the signs of a really good team and this is how we need to be even better, and we think about the signs, we can actually begin to uplift and produce the team that we need to produce. And then, of course, there's the positive principle. And there's so much science today behind positive images and positive actions produce positive results. I just showed you in the first question, the neuroscience behind it, the brain. So there's the neuroscience. There's positive image, positive action about placebo effect, the Pygmalion effect, positive affect. I mean, then there's a whole positive psychology movement. So there's a lot behind these principles. And the principles are who you are and how you operate in life. This is a fun slide. These are all the organizations around the world that are using appreciative inquiry and SOAR. They're using it to have better employees, more innovations, better work organizations. And you may notice some of these logos in here. So appreciative inquiry has been around since the 1980s. And, you know, I challenge you if you haven't, but if you do a search on Google or YouTube or TEDx, or if you go to the Appreciative Inquiry Commons, there's a lot out there on appreciative inquiry. And if you were to type in the word AI in a field that you're in, I bet you'd find at least a half a dozen articles. So most people are familiar with the appreciative inquiry 5D cycle that uses generative questions, and it's very iterative. And the reason it's called the 5D cycle is first you want to define the task, bring people into discovery, dream what might be, design it, and deliver on it. So it's an iterative cycle, and you could literally do an entire workshop just on this 5D cycle. So appreciative inquiry is made up of principles. It's a way to ask a generative question, and it has a 5D cycle. So my next area I want to talk to you about is just what is a generative question? And generative questions, when you ask them, they begin to widen your view, change the way people think. They're very expansive, they're discovery, and they give you images for people to act on. So that brings you to my third question in my presentation. What is the power of generativity? So what I want you to do is I want you to think about the types of conversations. So Sherry Torres and I did a lot of research on the 2 dimensions that when we're in a conversation, There's either an appreciative dimension or a depreciative dimension. So this first slide here shows you below the line. The depreciative dimension are other destructive conversations. I say something negative, you say something negative, and it just begins to drain us. Critical conversation. So I don't really want you to spend any time in this destructive conversation box. It's not a healthy place to be. Critical conversations are in yellow. They're still not a great place to be, but a critical conversation is where I ask you a question and I said, why did you do that? What were you thinking? And so my tone is below the line and my questions are going to take you below the line. And they're usually questions that you're blaming people, your tone is taking them in a negative place. Then these places are not good to be in that depreciative state. Now, if you are below the line and you realize I just asked somebody a critical question, you can pause, begins to reset you, you can take a deep breath, and you can learn to ask questions to get you above the line. And so or you can make a statement. So when we're above the line, we're in this appreciative state. And sometimes you can make a statement to say, I need a do-over. I'm sorry. Let's move this in the right direction. Or you can begin to ask questions that value and that show you are curious. And typically appreciative inquiry questions are generative. You're curious and you're asking, so tell me more about that. How do you see it? What do you think? So they're questions that are expansive and that are generative. And this is just questions you can even ask yourself, is to really tune in and ask yourself, where am I? And Harvard Business Review did an entire issue, not one article, but an entire issue on when we are curious people, we naturally ask questions from an appreciative space. We can view very tough situations creatively and have less defensive reactions to when things go wrong. So this entire issue talks about the business case for curiosity, and it can improve your firm's adaptability and performance. So if you ever read Harvard Business Review, you can always order a back issue, but I read this entire issue and thought, wow, the power of curiosity, appreciative inquiry, asking a right question, it's all about curiosity. And that brings us back to, here are some examples of generative questions to ask yourself. We all talk to ourselves, whether we admit it or not. And when you talk to yourself, ask yourself, am I below the line? Where am I? What's driving my reaction to this? What's going on? What don't I know? You got to stop making stuff up. What do I want to happen? What might be possible right now? What's one small action? These are generative questions that begin to help you be more expansive and good and true to yourself and able to have conversations with others. These are generative questions to shift a conversation. You can literally walk up to two people who are going negative and at each other, and you can ask them, so what's happening here? And how do you see it? And how do you see it? What about the person in the meeting that's never talking? Asking them, how do they see it? What are their observations? What might be possible now? What is one small action that we could do as a team that would make a difference? So generativity opens us up, lifts us up, helps us be more creative, helps us to connect and be expansive. Before I get to the final question, here's a situation. A person or a client is always late for my appointment, and I'm irritated because they never acknowledge it or apologize. And my reaction might be, I'm judging them. I'm blaming them for being late. I'm kind of angry, or I'm annoyed with them. Sometimes I might even have self-doubt. Maybe this person doesn't value me or my time and think I'm effective. And I start pushing myself. It could be below the line. What I want you to think about when you start talking to yourself and you're going below the line, I want you to think generative questions. Ask yourself, where am I in this situation? What are my feelings about Jackie always being late? Who chose this time? Maybe there might be a better time, a mutually agreed upon time. Maybe I need to ask Jackie a better time that we should be meeting. What don't I know? And a lot of times you're making stuff up. You don't want to do that. So that's why you want to pause and breathe and get curious. It's a very healthy technique by the Heart Math Institute. I've seen this technique all over the internet, to pause and breathe and get curious. Okay. And then talk to the person and ask this person, does this time work for you for our sessions? What's happening before these meetings? Because you're always, you've got to call out the situation. You're always late. Might there be a better time for us to meet, or a better day of the week? And what are you hoping to get? Are these meetings useful? What are you hoping to get from our time together? Be really curious. And maybe it's not about lateness. There's lots of other stuff going on. And that's what generative questions begin to do for you. So that was my third question. I told you I had 4 questions in this presentation. So the fourth question is, how do your questions help others to soar? And what SOAR is, and SOAR came from the findings of my capacity building dissertation about 20 years ago, or 25 years ago to be exact, that SOAR is a profoundly positive approach to strategic thinking, how you think, strategic planning, strategic conversations, that when you're leading a group, a community, an organization, or a team, and you really you're very intentional. Strategy is about being intentional, strategic, about how you want to discuss anything and connect. And I want you to pay attention to this next slide. Look at the word SOAR. Can you see the word AI in SOAR? Claudia, I can see you. Can you see the AI in SOAR with the light blue? Appreciative inquiry is the operating system of SOAR. All these years, it took me a few years to realize that there was an A and an I in SOAR. This did not happen until about a couple of years ago. And I have to tell you, it was actually my husband who said, oh, look, AI is in SOAR. He's the one who looked at it and I said, oh my gosh, I've never seen it that way. So that made me feel really happy after 25 years. AI is the heart of SOAR. And think about strength. That strength configurations is what we're going to have conversations. What are we really great at doing? I believe David Cooperrider wrote an article some time ago that strengths to strengths magnify. So you can have conversations around strengths. You can have conversations around opportunities. Now that we know what we're really good at, what's possible? What are the ideas? What are the innovations? If we have these strengths and we can do anything, what do we want to do here as a team, as an organization, or as an industry? And aspirations are, what do we care deeply about, aspire to? Where do we want to go? We can't do everything. Money is finite and time is finite. So if you know your strengths, you have all these expansive opportunities to go after, and you have a conversation about your aspirations, you can figure out what should be our strategic initiatives. What 3 or 4 things could we be doing to move the team forward, to move the organization forward? What could we be doing? And at the end of the day, the only way we know if we succeed is, what are the results are we looking for? How do we know we're succeeding? How do we know when we get there? Results need to be measurable and or meaningful. So it could be meaningful and measurable. When SOAR came about in the early 2000s, it was strictly a way to do strategy and strategic planning. 20 years later, we've learned, and that's what led us to today's presentation, that SOAR can be used as a coaching technique. So if you're looking to coach anybody, you could be coaching an athlete, a colleague, an employee. You could be coaching up to your boss. But if you're looking to do coaching, the first thing you want to do is ask the person, what's going on for you? And to realize, are they above the line? they below the line. And trying to help them get above the line will be asking great questions, coming from that appreciative space. Great questions using AI are generative questions. And asking them, so what would you like to create here? What do you want to be doing on my team here? What's your contribution? Tell me about that possibility. What would this look like? Why is this important to our team? And then if you want to make it a reality, you begin to say, so what are your strengths as they relate to this possibility? What opportunities do you see in the situation that you want to seize? And what do you most aspire to create? What's your vision here? And what actions and goals are you willing to commit to? How do I support you? And what results will indicate your progress? And then you begin to coach them into, when you create this new possibility, what else becomes possible next? So you're always creating, and it's generative. And what actions and awareness will you commit for this week? And how can I help you get there? How can I support you? So going back to the very first question of this presentation is learning to ask right questions. I want you to think about, what is your tone of your questions? Where are your questions taking you and others? How do your questions make people feel? Because we've experienced that. And what is one change or action that you will do today that will help you soar? Now, this takes practice. Don't get me wrong, I've been working on this for 25 years. I do fall below the line. But today it takes me anywhere from 30 seconds, 3 minutes, no more than 30 minutes to get back above the line, because I know how bad it is for me and the other person. I try really hard not to be below the line more than 30 minutes at a time by using some of the techniques I've shared with you today. And to be really tuned in and practice asking generative questions to positively influence yourself and others. And to be really purposeful with the SOAR. It's a framework, it's very flexible. I showed you how to go SOAR, but I could start the conversation with R and say, so what results are you looking for? Okay, so if these are the results that you're looking for, what do you aspire to be? And then I ask an A question, and what's the opportunities and what strengths do you have? So you don't have to ask the question SOAR. That is how SOAR started, but it's flexible. You could go backwards. You could go RAOS, or we could just talk about strengths and opportunities today, and let's not be pressured into figuring out results. But the key word is practice. And one thing I'd like to have you type into the chat before we open it into conversation is, what's one thing you'll try in the next 24 hours? Or when you get up in the morning? Because I know for you it's evening time, but what's one thing you will try in the next 24 hours?
So I stopped the translation for a moment, and I would like you to share for a minute, whilst people chat, about this course. Voy a compartir el curso que, and we didn't talk about the price, el precio que ponen, no sé si será el precio final, pero bueno, yo les comparto el programa. Empieza el 15 de febrero y será el pensamiento estratégico, aprender a SOAR, el ciclo de las 5 Ds y áreas estratégicas de aplicación y prácticas para realizar con sus equipos y departamentos. Es un curso sobre conversaciones estratégicas, expandiendo un poco lo que ha explicado hoy en el webinar, y empezará el 15 de febrero, será en línea. So if you want to share a little bit, I will put again the translation. Voy a conectar la traducción de nuevo.
So, Mary, I'm not sure what you mean. I'm presented all the sides. Is there something more you'd like me to share, or? Because I want to open it up to questions and answers from the folks or observations.
I just shared, Jackie, the course that you are going to give.
Mm-hmm.
You are going to give a course in February. So before we go into questions and answers, if you can share for 2 minutes, what will the course be about? It will be to enlarge what you just shared.
Yeah, so the course, so this.
Voy a poner la traducción.
Yes. So this was more about leading up to SOAR and why SOAR is important. So the course takes you through four modules about the history of SOAR, what is SOAR, how to use SOAR for strategy and strategic planning, how to use SOAR to do evaluations. So the course is more about how to use SOAR, case studies on SOAR, some templates for you to use on SOAR should you want to do strategy and strategic planning using SOAR in your organizations.
Hi, Jackie.
Yes.
Yes, as we agreed, you have to click the English so that then I can talk to you and translate the questions. So I'm going to go back to I'm going to put this on so that you can click English. Vale, voy a poner la traducción y eligen español o inglés según a quien quieran escuchar, vale.
So Miriam, where do I click English at? Language? Click here to get started.
There are 3 points below your bar, your screen bar, and then you go to after subtitles. There's interpretation in Spanish. I don't know how to say it.
Okay, hold on. I see.
Then you go to English or Spanish.
Okay. Okay, so yes, I can hear you. So you know, no matter what technique, you always name it. You name where people are. You have to understand where people are. So if they're below the line, you have to understand why are they below the line so that you get them back above the line so that you can move them forward. So, you know, if you're in an office and somebody's below the line because they have a problem at home, they're dehydrated, they haven't gotten enough sleep, they first need to take care of their basic needs before you can help them. Does that answer your question? Susanna, your hand is raised. Can you speak English or do you need interpretation?
Yes, I can. I was wondering,
what's the measure, from where did you get this, from this line above and beyond? What does it, where did you, how can you manage to know what's up or down the line?
So conscious leadership, if you were to Google conscious leadership, came up with a straight line, and people are either above it or below it. And it's very hard to tell unless you ask people questions. And sometimes you can tell people by their body language if they're kind of looking snarly or snarky, that they're below the line, or they're closed down, or they're not paying attention. So it's just a straight line, and you're not going to be able to move somebody above the forward unless they're helping them above the line. The person who asked the question is, no matter, I can ask all the generative questions in the world, but if you haven't gotten enough sleep and you're dehydrated and something's going on at home, I'm not going to be able to help you. And that's why you have to in.
I was wondering, Jackie, because I use a model of emotions, Dr. Hopkins model. I don't know if you know it.
No, tell me more.
Yeah, because you gave me more information of the things I use. This model puts courage in the line, the horizontal line, and contractive emotions below and expansive emotions up the line. And he has the categories of all this emotion in a way he measured it, that it's a body language. It's a very kinesthetic way of measuring. Okay. So what you speak today gives me like more information to work with coaching using this emotional background, which I usually use, because there is another model that you start all the time asking, how do you feel? Or what does this does to you, if you don't want to talk about feeling, if it's a person that doesn't go easy on that language. So what's going on with you with that, with this thing that is happening? So I usually start in this way you say, trying not to guess. Obviously one see each other, but trying to make the other one speak about their emotion and get in contact with it. So thank you very much for what you gave us today.
And you said something really interesting. I could ask you, how do you feel? And some people are like, I'm not going to tell you how I feel. You could say, so what's going on with you? And you might say, oh, I'm really rushed. I didn't have time for breakfast. I haven't had my cup of coffee. So they're below the line. They haven't eaten, they're rushed. And so some people will tell you how they feel and some won't. Or you just say, that coaching's like, what's going on? And then you hear them talk and you're like, yeah, they're going below the line. I didn't get enough sleep last night, or I'm really worried about my dog is sick. So no matter what you try to do with generative questions, if they're below the line, it's not going to work, because that's so powerful, their state, their emotions. So yes, very good. Very great observation. Is it George or Jorge?
Either way, it's okay, Jackie. I would like to ask a question because I admire your work and I've been following for a while. And I use a lot of strategic work that I do with strategic thinking and strategic planning. And one of the issues or pushbacks that I get in using this appreciative inquiry approach of SOAR is, where do we see the environment situation? How do we evaluate some of the threats, some of the pushbacks that they could see, or some of the considerations that they would need to have about either competition or situations that could change their strategy, instead of focusing on themselves only, How do they see what is happening outside in the environment? How will you address that in the opportunities?
Yes, and here's how. So I've always taught strategy and I've done strategy. And so here's the thing on strategy. There's this thing called the external environment, and we cannot control the external environment. And in the external, out there in the world, there's opportunities and there's threats, right? Which you brought up. So there's things that are going on. It's called the pestle factors, PESTEL. There's things going on politically, beyond our control, economically, social, technological, environmental with the environment, and legal. And SOAR doesn't ignore the threats. SOAR will say, what threats are you concerned about? And how do we frame those into an opportunity? So we might have a problem with unethical business practices in our industry. And I can't control those unethical business practices out there of other people. I could have my own company, hopefully, but not other. So the opportunity begins to be, how do we have sustainable and ethical business practices? And can we get people in our industry to talk about this and our suppliers to come together? Now, here's an opportunity of a threat that's hurting us that we're going to try to bring people together to have a conversation on. Instead of beating up all these threats and what's wrong and what we can't do and how horrible this is, where's the opportunity here for us? So you're right. You reframe threats and weaknesses through aspirations and opportunities, and strengths are internal that you can control. And then you decide, is this something we want to take internal and cultivate a strength in our industry or strength in our organization? Does that make sense, Jorge?
Yeah, so I think so, Jackie, and I think that's the way I used to put it as an opportunities. It's a way to look at the threat, but it's not about ignoring it.
Yes.
For instance, COVID is, I mean, there are things that we don't control, but we still need to deal with that and adapt to it, right?
You bet.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And when I think of COVID, this was the first time in the world that vaccines got through some type of system within a matter of 6 months in testing, whereas before it took 5, 8, 10 years to get a vaccine out. Well, when the whole world needed it, the industry did change. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is it Lasiva? Did I pronounce that right? I hear you now. Yeah, I'm not sure what the question is. I like what I'm hearing. I just don't know what the question is. Wow, that's a great question. When I think of SOAR and appreciative inquiry as its operating system, is bringing in the relevant stakeholders. So I think of it as being inclusive and strength-based. And I think when I think of empathy and compassion, I think those are traits that you want in leaders. I think I've heard that the number one skill in a leader needed today is empathy, is putting yourself in that person's situation. And I think compassion is important for leaders. So I'll give you an example. As a business manager, we have to-do lists. We know what we're going to get done today and we're going to prioritize it. But a leader has a to-be list. A leader is, I've got to show up for this meeting with my shareholders, and they're going to want to talk about money. And I have to be listening and catalytic and opening to bringing them into the stakeholders. So that when I hear the words empathy and compassion, this is how I have to be as a leader versus a manager. These are the things I need to do and get done. I don't think I have a really good answer. She liked it. Her thumb went up, right?